it's okay to temporarily be in this victim mindset, because things are going to happen and you are going to feel a certain way. And so for you to just completely disregard how you feel in the immediate moment when something does happen it's just going against yourself. And then that self-trust and that self-confidence erodes every time that you decide to use that same story as a justification for not doing anything about it.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the thing where it goes.
Being able to accept and then being able to move on and take action so that thing doesn't happen again, that's what overcoming that victimhood mentality, in my opinion, is. So welcome to the Embodying Excellence Podcast. I'm your host, Carlo. I'm really, really happy to be back. I'm with Brendan, and today we're going to be talking about victimhood versus vulnerability. So, with that being said, would you like to get started?
Well, in terms of victimhood, it seems to be a prominent thing in today's society. It's probably getting drained out a bit more now, but in previous times seems to be that people are picturing themselves as a victim, and then as a result they are playing to get a bit of a sympathy from other people, and then that's just making themselves feel worse at the end of the day and not doing any good in that respect. But there's a lot of other things. But what do you?
Yeah, look, I would say that I have done that myself, where I've been in a tight spot, and rather than taking responsibility for my decisions and putting myself in that position, I've gone, it's my family's fault, or my friend's fault, or this person did this, or this thing happened so that I couldn't do what I needed to do. Like, I felt that people were out to get me, or things were against me, so I couldn't make something happen. And so that victimhood narrative is something that I've personally experienced myself, and I'm working continuously to overcome. So I understand what this all means and why it's important to not embody that mindset and that narrative anymore. And so there are still parts of me where I'm going, hey, look, I am a victim, but at the same time, I also understand, hey, I have the power to make change. And so for me to continue cultivating that narrative of I have that power to make change allows for those changes to then happen when I do the things necessary that are going to improve my life. And so from a personal standpoint, there have been times where I have gone and said, hey, look, this isn't on me. This isn't my fault. So I don't really need to do anything about it. I'll just pass the torch on to somebody else so that then they get exposed to who they really are, whilst I just sit back and go, hey, look, this isn't on me. And so, like I said, like, it's very present in a societal framework, because there are lots of people that are suffering from different maladies. That's what I want, maladies.
Yeah.
Where they sort of go, look, I'm stuck, or I don't know what to do, or this thing has happened and I don't know how to overcome it. And so it's okay to temporarily be in this victim mindset, because things are going to happen and you are going to feel a certain way. And so for you to just completely disregard how you feel in the immediate moment when something does happen it's just going against yourself. And then that self-trust and that self-confidence erodes every time that you decide to use that same story as a justification for not doing anything about it.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the thing where it goes.
Being able to accept and then being able to move on and take action so that thing doesn't happen again, that's what overcoming that victimhood mentality, in my opinion, is. So I'm not saying that it's okay to continue to parade that narrative, but you've got to be able to accept where you are as well. And so there are going to be times where you're going to be having your back against the wall and things are going to happen. And by you ignoring that and not going, hey, you know what, this is where I currently am, and then instead just passing the blame onto somebody else, then you're going to be in serious trouble. Because only you can control the changes that you make in your own life. And by continuing to parade this victim narrative of it's everyone else's fault and I have no responsibility, you will just continue going in loops and loops and loops. And I can say from experience that's exactly what I've done, which is how I arrived at this conclusion.
Yeah, and that's going to make it worse as well. Like if you keep saying to and speaking to people about how it's not your fault, the world's just fucked. If you keep putting that in your head and people just confirm that to you, it's just going to be further entrenched in there. And you're not going to be able to escape from that mentality. Whatever it is, if you say it enough times, eventually you're going to believe it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are being in that victimhood mindset and just playing at that, particularly through social media and stuff like that. And they're getting a lot of attention, a lot of sympathy, but a lot of time you think, do they really care about you in that regard? They're probably just sick of seeing it and they're just trying to be nice. But sometimes you need someone to say, look, yeah, you may have an issue here, but we have to work with each other to get to the bottom of what it is that you're going through and solve the problem and move past it. You can't just keep going through the same motions and doing the same thing over and over again. You're not going to help yourself, you're not going to help the people around you. Yeah.
I think Goggins said it best is that if you tell me that you have the same problem twice, then you're just bitching. And so if you don't have the initial problem that you've told me solved, by the time we see each other next, then you're just venting or you're just excusing yourself from not solving the problem. You just want attention or you just want to be heard. And so it's important to recognize that when you have a problem, to address the problem immediately. And sometimes the answer is, hey, look, I want to be heard. And so sometimes people don't get this sense of feeling heard or feeling validated in an appropriate manner, which is what vulnerability is about, which we'll get on to in a minute. And so when someone approaches you with a problem and you go, oh, right, okay, here's how you can solve the problem. That's fantastic. But also at the same time, sometimes, and this is most present in my experience with women, is that sometimes they just want to be heard and they want to be felt and they want your presence and your strength so that then they can go, hey, you know what? Despite all this happening, this is going to be okay. And so 100%. When you are there, that discernment needs to be made. So if you're going, hey, look, I've got this issue, I'm not sure what to do, can you help? Okay, cool. Here's what I think you should do, X, Y, Z. Amazing. Hey man, look, I'm currently having this issue. I don't feel like that I can really speak about it to anybody. Do you mind lending an ear? Then you go, okay, you know what? He doesn't want a solution yet because he feels like that he needs to unpack this problem. And once this problem is unpacked, then you go that extra step and say, hey, you know what? Are you willing to act on a solution for this problem? Or is this something that you still want to stick with? Because sometimes you might not be exactly ready. You might not ever be ready. But at the same time, in a particular moment, there might be an instance where that particular person who's currently facing that problem is just going through the emotional aspects of that particular issue and maybe just not the physical aspect. So, and that's why people get stuck in loops as well, in my experience, is because they understand what the solution is, but it's more comfortable to be in the problem because it's familiar. And so until people familiarize with the idea of actually being embracing of the problem and being accepting of the problem and then accepting that they're going to have to take that next step to the solution rather than just skipping the emotional embrace, then they'll be able to then achieve what they want to achieve because they've gone past that self-loathing and that self-shame of, oh my God, I'm this or I'm that, and because of X, Y, Z, I identify as a victim. Where if you just lay it out on the table and go, hey, look, right now you may be a victim of a circumstance or a problem that you caused yourself. At the same time, I hear you, and it's important that you feel safe enough to tell me, and you feel vulnerable enough to tell me. And so you've said all of this, what are we going to do about it? And so that is the process of moving into vulnerability. And so we'll go into depth of why vulnerability is important, but to make sure that we're completely clear, victimhood is this narrative that you don't have any power towards things that might have happened to you or your own decision-making process that have led you to the current circumstances that you're in, which is completely not true. You do have that.
Yeah, 100%. You have control of many things, and just going on that past point, listening is very important. A lot of the time I find people are listening without listening and just thinking about what they have to say about the situation without taking on board what the person talking to them is saying. And that's not doing anyone any good. You're not learning anything as a listener, and the person that's trying to convey their message isn't getting that feedback either. It's just, it's unfortunately seems to happen a bit, and we've got to work together a bit more in that regard and try and help. In terms of controlling what you can control, victimhood can be in many areas, like you said, to be, for example, people could play victim to themselves not being educated, could be being overweight, many different areas that they can. Like you can control them two things alone, control what you're eating, you can control what you're doing in your spare time. You could watch movies, or you could you could still watch stuff, but educational stuff on YouTube even, or wherever you get your information from to build towards where you want to go. Like there's choices there. You're in control of what you do there. When you have them choices, you can't really, to me, play victim because you're in control of things.
And I think that's correct. That's absolutely right. And also at the same time, I think it's also really important to discern where the comfort zone is as well.
Yeah.
Because as you said, you have that choice. But I feel as though in my experience, like in my personal experience, that choice is evident, but the belief that I have the ability to follow through on such choices is that bridge that I'm afraid to cross. And so with vulnerability and actually having difficult conversations and articulating exactly what it is that you're feeling and expressing it in a way that isn't just either venting or abdicating any form of responsibility on your own part to somebody else, that connection then grows. Because if you're able to talk, especially man to man, where I say to you, perhaps for example, hey, I have this situation at the moment and this is what I'm currently feeling and experiencing in this situation. Can you just lend an ear? Or, hey, are you open to receiving what I have to say? Because the thing is, sometimes what I might say might be really heavy. And the thing is, you only have a capped amount of energy for this particular thing. And it's not your place to go, hey, you know what, I'm just going to completely absolve all of my energy so that I can take Carlos' thing on board, because then that's neglecting yourself. And so being able to recognize, hey, look, I'm not in a particularly sound place right now, so for me to receive what you have to say isn't probably very viable for my own well-being either. And so can we have this conversation another time? Sure, no worries, that other time arrives. Hey, you know what, Carla, I'm in a better place at the moment. I'm open to listening, and there isn't any judgment or any criticism, and I'm not going to provide any solution unless you ask for it. And then you have that conversation. And And then when that conversation is had, I will definitely feel, hey, you know what? I've been heard. He's listening to me. And then at the same time, I can unpack that problem. And then that problem is just there, laid bare. Then you go, hey, look, I see that you're having this issue and I'm sorry that you've been through that. Thank you for sharing that with me. And what can we do about it? What would you like to do? Here's what I think. And if that's okay with you, we can make that choice together. Because sometimes when we're by ourselves and we have evident choices that are better for us, and we don't make those, it's because that self-belief of crossing that bridge and going towards and leaning towards the unfamiliar and leaning towards that resistance is challenging. And because we are social creatures as well, better to have a brother by our side who's willing to go to war with us than we do it alone. So being able to have that conversation, that vulnerable conversation where there is going to be a lot of emotion, but there is also just going to be a lot of expressive articulation where you can accurately describe the situation in a way that isn't gallivanting to the other person or neglecting or pushing away responsibility on your own part to either the circumstance or the other person that you might think is at fault for the circumstance to be happening. Once that's done, then you can establish common ground because you, like you said, people tend to listen without listening, and we're all subject to that because we tend to go towards our own problems in life. But when we can just take that step back and go, hey, look, I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to be open, then that conversation can be had. That person feels much better being able to unpack it. They feel much safer with the other person as well, in that they can be more connected with that brother that they're talking to, if it's the guys, and then sister if it's gals. And they're able to then together come up with a viable solution to that. Then that person has that freedom to choose whether to act on said solution, but 99% of the time they do act on it because they have that comfort knowing that a brother or a sister actually believes in them. And goes, hey, look, I'm still here and I still love you if this decision is made and it doesn't go to plan. And so that's the difference between being a victim and being vulnerable, is that way of communicating and the articulation and the responsibility that that person who has a problem takes when they actually disclose to the person that they're talking to what the issue is and how they would like to then go about solving such issue.
I agree with that. You just got to play it day by day.
Sometimes it's as simple as that, and then other times it's moment to moment because because being able to, it's a practice where if you're constantly conscious about the decisions that you're making and then you're focusing on the things that are important and the things that matter, then you'll be able to get to that destination faster. Where if you're constantly distracted or you're not in a place mentally where you're making moves because you're afraid of the potential outcome of making said move, then you're going to remain where you are. And it's so much easier to then go, oh, you know what, it's that person's fault, right, for being stuck where I am. When, in fact, I didn't make the necessary decision yet to move forward for whatever reason that has not led me to the outcome that I'm after. And so that's how I've found I've been stuck in perpetuity of victimhood. And then with my clients that I've trained when they're trying to lose weight, that's that same cycle that I've found them stuck in. So when they say, hey, I can't lose weight, or I can't seem to be following the plan, or whatever their story is. And so what I used to do was, hey, you know what, you need to train yourself through it. It's a discipline, it's a practice, you need to keep going, keep going, keep going. Where with now the emotional aspect and getting a deeper understanding of myself and connecting with like-minded brothers over the last 3 weeks and then over the course of the last few years in my self-development work, I've been able to then make that discernment then you're going, right, okay, that person has now opened something else for me because I was willing to open myself up. Where if you're shut off from solutions, whatever solution you give, it could be the most obvious one in the world, but I'm not going to execute on it because I've shut myself off. Yeah. I've decided, hey, you know what, I'm just looking for a quick fix and Brendan has the answers, so I'll just talk to Brendan and then I won't contribute anything. I won't be vulnerable. I won't be open. It's a one-sided transaction where I have a problem. I expect Brendan to give me the solution, and then I expect Brendan's solution to then benefit me without doing anything. And that never works. And that's the mentality of the victim, where they're going, I'm not at fault. It's everyone else's fault, so everyone else should provide me the solution so that then I can get better. When in reality, I'm the one that's poisoning myself by perpetuating this narrative.
Yeah. Going on vulnerability, being open to speaking to someone, that's a sign that you've got trust in them as well. So I think that's important to build over time, and by someone sticking to their word as well. I think that's a big thing. When someone says they're going to do something and they follow through, that's big for me. Whereas if you just talk shit, say you're going to do something and never follow through to it, that's a big trust barrier as well. So being able to follow through on things and doing what you say you're going to do is a big thing for opening up for me. What do you?
Yeah, totally. And we've worked together, but the thing is, we've been mates now, and we've been super close for years.
Yeah.
And we've had conversations where I've opened up to you and go, hey, look, this is the current dilemma that I'm in, and parts of me was just going, I don't really want to say these things because I don't know how it will be interpreted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also realized that, like, there isn't any reason why I can't tell you. And so I've gone, hey, you know what? This is important to me. It matters. I've asked you whether you were willing to listen and if you were able to be open to have this conversation, and we had those conversations.
Yeah.
You've had similar conversations with me as well. And so time is a factor, like when it comes to building trust, but it isn't the only factor. And so the ability to articulately express emotion as well as contribute to your own solutions builds trust a lot faster as well. And one of those ways is following through on the things you say. And when you say something in confidence, it stays in confidence. And then when you do say something that matters and you speak to the universe and open yourself up and allow and trust yourself for whatever you say to happen, then those things begin to happen. And it's understanding what's important and what's not. And so when you have set priorities and you don't play the victim, you don't apply that narrative, and you use vulnerability as a way to open yourself up to the world, then the world will open up to you as well. Where if you don't, then it's quite possible that you will stay stuck in this victim narrative. And sticking to your word when you're stuck in a victim narrative is challenging because you don't trust yourself and then you don't trust other people. And so when you deliver promises to other people, often, and I've experienced this as well, is, hey, I can get this done. I tell the person, then I don't know if I can actually get this done. Like, I've overpromised, and now I need to deliver. I know I have the skills, but that bridge between the belief that I possess in my mind and the story that I tell myself versus executing on said skills, it's a big gap. And I'm only focusing on the gap rather than actually just applying the skills and doing the thing. And so using vulnerability as a way to open yourself up so that then whatever it is that you've got packaged within your body, within your mind, can just be laid out on the table there, then that gap closes. Because now you're going, express how I truly feel in an articulate manner that then contributes to the solution. And so that action of being vulnerable then precedes the successive action that you take along that belief that you've just now created for that action to be taken. And so when you act on anything, there's always a story behind it. And so if that story is, hey, I'm stuck, or hey, I'm a victim, then it doesn't lead to success. It just leads to continuing being a victim. Where if that belief and that identity becomes, hey, I take action, I'm successful because I take action, or I'm successful because I articulate things and I communicate well, I'm successful because I invest my money in things that are going to make me more money. I'm successful in my relationship because I invest in my relationship with myself and with other people. Like, you continue doing those things based on being vulnerable and being open to the universe, those things grow. But when you close yourself off, that won't grow. It's like trying to plant a seed without digging a hole. You need to dig a hole in the ground and open the ground up so that then there's a great place to put the seed and then nurture said seed. Where if you just leave the ground shut off and you just plant the seed on top of the soil, like right at the top, well, it's not going to grow because there's no foundation, there's no root. And so for that to take root, you need to be able to open yourself up, you need to be able to dig a little bit. And so that's how vulnerability is super important when it comes to saying things and meaning what you say and having those difficult conversations.
Yeah, 100%, I agree with that.
It's powerful, and understanding that difference has allowed me to even just have this conversation, like, because we've had many conversations outside of this podcast that have been of similar nature. And so I don't personally recall myself articulating this particular subject in this particular manner. It's just been more random, where I'm sitting now and I'm talking about this and I'm going, dude, this feels so simple and it feels so succinct and it answers a lot of questions that I've had. And so now just applying it with everything, with my businesses, with this podcast, with my friends, with my family, it's been a game changer for me. And just being vulnerable, which means, and I want to clarify, being vulnerable means that you're being open, honest, clear, articulate, and all of those things that you say, either in confidence or in public, are then going to be followed through with the actions that this particular belief that you've created now holds. And so by being vulnerable, I have been able to go, hey, you know what, I don't hold shame for things that I do. And I'm going to make mistakes. I always make mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes. And I'm not everybody. I'm just accounting for myself. That when I do fuck up, I take full responsibility by being vulnerable and going, hey, look, I fucked up. And this is why. Here's what I was feeling through that process. Here's what was going through my mind. And here's what needs to be done. And I'm really thankful that you can just sit with me and listen for a moment as I'm unpacking all of this, so that then once it is unpacked, then we don't really need to rehash on it anymore, because it's not something I'm perpetuating anymore. And we tend to perpetuate things, and from personal experience, I perpetuated things because I only saw the problem in a lot of things. And so it was comforting to go, oh, I'm just going to replay this particular event and wish I could do things differently. So then in my mind, I feel like that I was in control of that situation, when in reality I wasn't, and it upset me, or it made me feel uncomfortable. And rather than address that discomfort and that upset or anger in that particular moment, I've decided, you know what, I'm just going to withhold, I'm going to withdraw, I'm going to numb, whatever I've decided to do, detach. Then when I go home and I've got time to myself, I'm just going to just replay that event over and over and over again, but just with different circumstances, wishing that things were better, rather than going, oh, hey, you know what, this thing happened, and it only happened in that way because that's the way it happened, and that's not going to change. So what can change, though, is that what I decide to do, so that then I have a different outcome rather than replaying the same story and then perpetuating the same beliefs and then enmeshing my identity with this victimhood narrative that then continues to perpetuate me into dangers of depression and anxiety and other things that other people do go through on a daily basis. And so this particular subject can be used as a tool to utilize a person's ability to learn how to express themselves and articulate how they feel with people that they trust. And so you are going to cop judgment or you're going to cop backlash because it happens, because not everyone is just completely open to the idea that you can freely just have conversations without people judging you. And so being able to actually express how I feel and say the things that I've done without fear and knowing that I've got people by my side who support me, it's been massively helpful. And so I implore everybody to use this particular tool of discernment from distinguishing the difference between victimhood and vulnerability and knowing and understanding that there are going to be moments where you are a victim. At the same time, that's not all of your life either. It's that particular moment, you use the vulnerability to become clear on what the problem is and you express yourself in a manner that is appropriate for the context of the situation. It's a lot easier to have somebody that you trust to have a conversation with, and then you two can be like a hybrid mind to then come up with solutions that are going to then steer you away from perpetuating the problem and then directing to whatever destination you decide that you're going to go to with the actions that you take.
Yeah, I think that sums up about everything, I think.
Yeah, and I want to quickly touch on your personal experience with both of these. So when you were going through your own fitness journey and your own life journey, were there moments where you felt like that you were the victim of circumstances, and when you adopted a vulnerability mindset and a, hey, I need to take action on the things that I do every day mindset, what was the change like? What was the transition like? And how has that impacted your success in whatever it is that you're taking on?
At first, when I first started, it was more or less I'm in such a judge position because of all the stuff going on around me, like the position I'm in terms of the family events and the food that's presented. But at the end of the day, it wasn't all that. It was just my own decisions that contributed towards the person that I had become at that stage. Not that there wasn't anything wrong with that as such as a general person, but I just wasn't reaching to my full potential or on my way to reach my full potential, the pursuit of that. I was just sort of going through the motions and not being the person that I am. It was just, I was I guess I was playing victim a bit, but it was more just coming up with excuses that was the main thing for me, just coming up with excuses of why I wasn't doing things. And now I've used that through what I've learned over the last few years, just to take on board all that stuff and use it as ways to improve and keep going and just try and take everything head on rather than delaying stuff. Just acting like a bison going through the storm, not around it. Just going straight at it because that's the best way to conquer it. At the end of the day, that's the main thing for me. In terms of being vulnerable, I don't really do much of that, to be honest. I open up a bit, but I'm sort of keep things to myself a bit, if I'm being really honest. But I do every now and again speak about things that I've got on my mind, and that helps a lot because I get feedback from people, and that helps me improve. And yeah, I'm just a person that listens to things, and eventually I apply it after hearing it a few times, because you get stuck in your own ways as well. And I'm a bit stubborn as well. So, by listening and seeing someone have gone through something and listening to how they've combated that just helps me know that you can deal with a situation that way, in that manner. And that just helps me, if I'm being honest. There's some things I've got to work on as well, opening up a bit more, but I don't know, I feel as though I'm in a position now that I can just try and take things on head on and just get them done, while still having them moments along the road, and just electing to get the help at that stage. But for every day, so through your help, through people that I listen to and watch all the time, that's just given me really good perspective of how to deal with things, and that's how sort of I deal with it. And they sort of reflect on the day, show gratitude, and just move past things if you make a mistake, and just try and be a better person at the end of the day, not only for yourself but people around you, because you're relied upon by a lot of people. So I just try and be the best person I can, and
that's very well said. I think that wraps us up today. Yeah. I think we really covered a lot.
Yeah, so, a little bit, yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. Please be a bro. Share the show.
Yeah.
Alright, see you in the next episode.
Yeah.